Question 4 gives us two linear functions which are axes of symmetry for this function. Now this function is a hyperbola. Now you might be wondering, how do I know that? And it's because I recognize my standard form of a hyperbola. This is very essential to know off by heart because it's not on the formula sheet. So we can see like this equation has the same format as that, and they've given us the a value to be -4. So the hyperbola is going to look like this. Very powerful tool if you know this standard form. So we somehow need to get the p value and the q value, which are sitting over here and here. Now the mechanics of what's going on behind the scenes is quite complicated, so I'm going to walk you through it step by step. So for any given hyperbola, you have two axes of symmetry that run through this point over here. And the one goes uphill like this, and the other one goes downhill like this. So they've actually given us the equation of these two things over there and there. And I know that the one with the positive gradient, the number in front of x, 1 over here, is this one that goes uphill if you read it from left to right. And the one with a negative gradient, you see the negative in front of x, is the one that runs downhill. So P and Q are representative of the asymptotes of the hyperbola. So P will be this one that goes up and down, and Q is the one that goes left and right. So to get those, I need to find this point over here. This is a very special point. And that point is where these two axes of symmetry intersect each other. And to get points of intersection, you make the two graphs equal and you solve for x. So I'm going to make this one equal to that one and then solve for x. Okay, now that I've made them equal, I'm going to take this x over, it becomes positive x. I'm going to take this 1 over and it becomes -1. And x plus x is just 2x. 3 minus 1 is just 2. I divide both sides by 2 to get x on its own. And I get x to be 1. So now I'm going to sub that back into the graph to get my y value. This one looks a bit easier to work with. So if I put this x into that x's place, 1 plus 1 will give me 2. And that helps me conclude that this point of intersection between the axes of symmetry is 1 and 2. So the line going up is x equals 1. And the asymptote going left and right is y equals 2. And that will form my p and q values. So q is representative of the horizontal asymptote. So q is 2, as we can see there. And then this one must always be the opposite sign. If this is x equals 1, then this must be x minus 1. So we can just jump to our conclusion of p equals 1 and q equals 2. And let's have a look where the 3 marks are coming from. Equating these two equations gets you the first mark. Your x value gets you the second mark. And your y value gets you the last of the 3 marks. Now we have to get the x-intercept of g. So I'm going to need the equation to do that. So if I go back up, I'm going to grab this equation, but I'm going to fill p and q into this equation. And then to get the x-intercept, you've got to remember a small rule. You make y equals 0 and solve for x. So this g of x here is a placeholder for y. So we can just go ahead and change that to 0. And then I want to get this fraction on its own so I can cross multiply. So I'm going to take that 2 over and it becomes -2. And now I want to bring this up. It's sort of a shortcut of cross multiplication. When you bring it up, just remember to keep it in brackets because we're going to distribute this -2 in next. Okay, after we've distributed, we're going to take that 2 over and it becomes -2, -4, -2 is -6. And then lastly, we just have to divide both sides by -2 to get rid of this -2. And -6 divided by -2 is +3. And then finally, we have our x-intercept to be 3 and 0, x value of 3, y value of 0. Okay, and the 2 marks come from making y 0 over there, and the correct x value at the end of the day. Okay, and then all this hard work has been buttering us up to sketch the graph. Okay, so we've got the graph here. Let's see what we know about the graph. Alright, so this number on top will tell us which shape it is. Because that number is negative, it's going to adopt this shape. So let's get rid of that. And we also have the asymptotes of the graph. This number at the bottom is your vertical asymptote, and this number on the outside is your horizontal asymptote. So I'm actually going to start by drawing the 2 asymptotes. When you draw your asymptotes, just remember this one is the opposite sign, so it's x equals +1 and not -1. Then this one's just the normal sign, y equals 2. And y equals is a horizontal line, x equals is a vertical line. Now we know it's going to adopt this shape, so it's going to lie in this quadrant and this quadrant. So let's plot our x-intercept that we got earlier, this 3 and 0. That will lie somewhere on the right of this line, so I'm going to plop it over there. Okay, and I don't know what the y-intercept is. I know it's going to be somewhere here, but I don't know what it is. So you've got to work it out quickly because we've clearly got to show it. So to get the y-intercept, you make x equals 0 and solve for y. So this x over here, I'm going to make it to 0. And I'll change this to a y just to make myself a bit more comfortable. And then this thing is going straight in the calculator. And a chance I'm doing mental maths. Okay, if you pop it in your calculator, press equals, it gives you 6. And then I just need to clearly label that on the graph. You can see it's going to sit above this y equals 2 because it's y equals 6. And now I'm going to draw my hyperbola in. And then we are officially done. We've sketched what they asked for. We labeled what they asked for. So let's have a look where the 4 marks are coming from. Firstly, your y-intercept gets you your first mark. The vertical asymptote gets you your second mark. The correct shape of the graph gets you your third mark, and the horizontal asymptote gets you the 4th mark. And then the last question from question 4 asks us, for which values of x is g of x bigger than 0, aka is g of x positive? So we have to do this by looking at the graph. So g of x is a placeholder for y. So they're asking you where are the y values bigger than 0. So I can see that's happening over here. The y value is definitely bigger than 0 because we've got a 0 y value over there, and if we go down we get negative y values. So it's definitely working over here the whole way through. But then over here it's got negative y values, so it's not working over there. So it only starts having positive y values again after this point. So these are the regions where it's happening, and we've somehow got to state that in x values. So there's 2 ways which we can do this. I'm going to show you both ways. So we can start at -infinity and end at 1. And then how you write that is you say x is an element that starts at -infinity. You always use circular brackets for -infinity because it never includes infinities. And then that comes to a screeching halt at 1, the x value. And then I use circular brackets here because it's non-inclusive because there's no equals to sign over there. Then you put the word or and you state your second region. Now the second region is over here and it starts at the x value of 3 and goes on forever to infinity. And then that will be good enough to get you the 2 marks. Now the other way of stating it is when x is smaller than 1 or when x is bigger than 3. And you write it with inequality symbols like so. So it's really up to you to choose which one makes more sense to you. I find this one kind of creates a deeper understanding because you know where to start and stop and then start and stop. So my personal preference is this top one over here. And let's have a look where the 2 marks are coming from. So 1 mark comes from like the correct values, like 1 and 3. And the second mark comes from the correct notation. So are your inequalities pointing in the right direction? And do they have like the right equal sign or not equal sign, if you know what I mean? And then over here, the 3 and the 1 get you the first mark, and the notation, like the circular brackets, will get you the second mark.